my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt-Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place for women to come together to share their childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from women all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Kindred Bravely. From adorable maternity wear to comfortable nursing bras, this mom-owned company has you covered. See all of their comfy clothing at kindredbravely.com. I especially love their Simply Sublime nursing tank. I talk about it all the time, and all of their high-waisted leggings are amazing for pregnancy and postpartum this time of year. At the end of this episode, Lauren and I will be chatting about both of our favorites from Kindred Bravely. And you can use the coupon code BIRTHHOUR for 20% off your purchase at kindredbravely.com. Today's birth story guest is Katherine, and she has had a birth center birth at Roots Birth Center in Minneapolis, and she talks about their practice and how much it means to her, and then she shares her home birth experience outside Minneapolis this summer during COVID-19, as well as during the Black Lives Matter protests. Let's hear from Katherine. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Will you start by telling listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Katie. I live outside of the Twin Cities metropolitan area in a very cute town called Stillwater, Minnesota. And I live with my husband, Seth, and we have 2 children. Our daughter, Priscilla, just turned 2 this summer. And then we have a 4-month-old named Langston. And then we have a dog named Esther, who's a German Shepherd. I am a photographer. I have a background in editorial photography. I do a little bit of writing, mostly blogging these days. And I love all things creative. And my joy right now is being at home with my kids, which is a true blessing. And I'm very grateful for this role right now in my life.
All right. Well, I know you want to mostly focus on your more recent birth, but we might hear a little bit here and there about your first. So let's go ahead and start with your second pregnancy and what that looked like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually had our daughter before we got married, and then we got married in October of last year, 2019. And then we found out that we were expecting our son a week after our wedding, which was fun and exciting. We were down visiting my in-laws, and I just had that feeling. So I took a pregnancy test, and we had hoped for a pretty close age gap between our kids. I don't know if we were anticipating a 22-month age gap, but that's what happened. So the beginning of my pregnancy was very, kind of typical first trimester. I was very tired. This time I had a toddler. It's a completely different experience with, baby number 2. And I was just kind of busy. We had a pretty activity-rich fall with Bible study and MOPS and ECFE, which is like an early childhood kind of like educational play group that you can take your kids to here in Minnesota. So we were busy, and I was just kind of trying to get through the days. I was under the care of the same midwives who provided care for me for my daughter, Priscilla, which was great. And they were very supportive. We used to live in the Twin Cities, so we were very close to the birth center, the out-of-hospital birth center where we had our daughter. But then after she was born and before we got married, we moved. Like I said, we live outside of St. Paul now in a town called Stillwater. So they were very happy about us coming back to the birth center. But because my first birth had been very uncomplicated and on the faster side for a first labor, they were encouraging me to consider home birth. And I had been very interested in home birth for a very, very long time. And I had briefly considered it with my first. But I think for me, I wanted to feel like I was going somewhere. And even though all the equipment was the same at birth center versus a home birth, I just felt for my first that I needed to not be at home. But with the second, I eventually landed on home birth. And so by the time I was halfway through my first trimester, we had decided that was the path for us, which was kind of interesting because it was before COVID hit. So while I did have my son at home in 2020, like lots of other women chose to do, our decision was not driven by the pandemic. The decision was driven by my own positive first birth experience and Personally, for me, I do not desire to give birth in a hospital for a number of reasons. I'm a mom of color, and I just know the stats are not in my favor. I also know that for complicated births, that home is actually safer. So I was excited about the prospect of it. And I kind of had a dream team of midwives. The midwife that owns the birth center, her name is Rebecca. She owns Roots in North Minneapolis, which is a predominantly Black neighborhood in Minneapolis. And she is a woman of color. She used to do home births often and then kind of stopped doing them to focus on the birth center because, of course, that's a large endeavor. But I got her to agree to do a home birth for me. So I feel very lucky and blessed that she was willing and able to do that. And then I worked alongside another midwife who used to work at Roots as well. Her name is Allie. She was fantastic. And she has a home birth practice called North Star Midwifery. So I kind of had the dream team of Rebecca from Roots and Allie from North Star. And it was fantastic to have them as my main team. Of course, with my husband too, who's great. So my first trimester, tired, a little nauseous, not super nauseous. And then my second trimester was fantastic. And right in the middle of my second trimester is when the lockdown happened. So that was very interesting. I went from being pretty busy, going to activities, things like swimming classes with my daughter and MOPS and Bible study, to going nowhere. My husband owns his own business and he's a partner. So he started working from home that first week of March, and he's been working from home ever since. So now we're into October and we're just used to him being at home, which has been great. About halfway through my second trimester, I developed SPD. So I had quite a bit of pain in my pelvis and lack of mobility. So it was great having my husband home because he could lift my daughter in and out of her crib for naps. He could lift her up to the changing table and change her. He was absolutely instrumental in me not losing my mind those last months because I really needed an extra hand. And we just were really cautious about where we went and who we saw for a long time. We were the only adults that we saw. We just ordered our groceries in and we stayed at home, which was very interesting. So my appointments went from in-person to virtual. I felt pretty confident though, because I had my daughter. And like I said, my birth with her was very straightforward, very uncomplicated. It was wonderful. So I didn't have fear, and I love hypnobabies. So I went ahead and registered for the hypnobabies at home study course. And I had done the hypnobabies in-person course with Priscilla. And for my birth with Langston, I wanted that same very positive mindset. So I really enjoyed during Priscilla's nap time reading the book and then doing the tracks. For those who aren't familiar with hypnobabies, you listen to these MP3s and they're just fantastic. I really highly recommend hypnobabies. I know it's a pretty big time commitment. It's not as much as Bradley, but to me, I feel like preparing for birth I wish people put the same amount of effort in preparing for birth as they would put in preparing for their wedding. I love that meme that's been going around on Instagram where it says, instead of focusing on the nursery and what stroller to buy, focus on educating yourself around birth. And with every traumatic birth story I hear from a friend, I am pained because I just think that there's power in education and there's power in consuming your healthcare and realizing that you can make choices and advocating for yourself. I did do a doula course before I had Priscilla. I was hoping to photograph births and provide doula services as sort of a package. And so after that course, I really feel like my eyes were opened to the system of birthing in the United States. And as someone who's always kind of got an ear towards racial justice, I have just been appalled by our stats here. And Minnesota has pretty good birth statistics, and the birth centers are legal here. So it's not like Illinois where you can't go to a birth center. There's a great relationship, from my understanding of speaking with midwives, between the midwives and the doctors. And I'm sure there are people in my circle who think it's crazy that I had my children out of hospital. But for the most part, I feel like the response has been very affirmative and supportive. And I feel like I've been able to encourage other moms on their journey. So the end of my pregnancy was great. I got very big at the end, bigger than I was with Priscilla. Strangely enough, I only gained a few more pounds, but I just felt bigger. And it was summer. We live in a 150-year-old Victorian house. Even though we have air conditioning, it's still hot. We live on the third floor. Our bedroom's on the third floor. I did end up having an in-person home visit at the 37-week mark because I was concerned I was going to go into labor early, like I had with Priscilla. I had Priscilla at 37 weeks. So Allie and Rebecca came out, they dropped off the tub, and we kind of talked through the birth logistics. So like I just said, we live in a very old Victorian home that we love, and our master suite is on the top floor. And I had envisioned giving birth upstairs, but the stairs down to our second floor from our third floor are very narrow. So Rebecca had recommended me giving birth on the second floor just as a safety precaution, so that in the event of an emergency, we weren't going up and down all these stairs. So we ended up deciding to set the birth tub up in my son's nursery, which is really cool. So I can tell him that the room that he sleeps in now is the room that he was born in, which I think is very neat. So we got the birth tub set up, and I ordered my birth supplies. I ordered a birth kit, and I just kind of waited. You know, we had a lot of time on our hands. Like I said, we weren't seeing a lot of people. We started to open up our circle a little bit more as it got warmer. I know that that's kind of been the case for a lot of different places, especially up here in the north where it's just so cold in the winter. I wasn't worried about COVID. I knew I wasn't birthing in a hospital. And I remember telling my husband, you know, I basically need to be on death's door before you transfer me to a hospital. The way that I feel, I know that that's not everybody else's feelings, but, you know, I think after Serena Williams' story, I was very convicted about that. And with COVID, I kept reading these really scary posts in different Facebook groups I was in about what it was like to birth during a pandemic in a hospital, and things like your husband not being by your side. And I just did not want that for our family. So I was very excited about birthing at home, and my husband's all about home birth. So he was like, it's good. I got you. Like, we'll be fine. So he actually was like thinking that he was going to have to deliver the baby himself, because in March, we didn't even know what was going on. I mean, we kept watching the news. And then, of course, for those who have followed the George Floyd tragedy here in Minnesota, you know, we had just kind of caught our breath from COVID. And then we have this terrible, terrible incident in Minneapolis that was absolutely heartbreaking and gut-wrenching. And we're watching the news, and our city is burning. And it's, for me, it brought back a lot of memories of when Philando Castile was killed. And I was very involved in that, protesting for that. It was very different, obviously, this time as a pregnant woman living outside of the city, but still watching. And we did end up going down to the memorial. I was very, very pregnant, and we had an opportunity to visit that space. It was very intense. And even in Stillwater, where we live, there's been a couple of protests and then counter protests and a lot of just angst. I know that's the vibe in the rest of the country, but it's been very curious in Minnesota to watch that all play out. So I tried not to allow those events to stress me, but I do know that I was aware of them. I mean, how could I not be? The days leading up to my birth were interesting as well, because Roots is in North Minneapolis. And unfortunately, there was a lot of things happening in Minneapolis that I don't necessarily want to get into too much because we weren't living there, but I kept hearing these different things from friends and family who are in the city. And I know that at one point, Roots had to close because it was not safe for women to come and birth there because of what was going on in the neighborhood with counter protesters coming in from other places and trying to terrorize the neighborhood because of what had happened with George, which was very disturbing. And then there was curfews, right? So I just didn't know. I was like, I might wake up and have this baby by myself with my husband, which would have been fine. But I was also nervous for midwives who were providing care in the city and just what they were going through. You know, what happened on the news maybe wasn't exactly a reflection of what we were seeing happen. Like I said, we weren't living in the city, but it's very interesting knowing the racialized history of Minneapolis, having my own experiences with it. I was really curious as to how the media was telling the story. And I was so impressed with the midwives at Roots, who were, of course, once again, providing amazing care in a Black neighborhood. And thankfully, everything was fine at their building. Nothing happened, but we know of other buildings that were destroyed, obviously. So getting closer to my due date, which was actually June 19th. I grew up celebrating Juneteenth, and after George died, suddenly it was a thing for everybody else. So it was very interesting to hear people discover and learn about Juneteenth. For those who don't know, it's the celebration of being emancipated from slavery. And my own ancestors were enslaved. My dad's side of the family is from Georgia and Alabama. And I feel a very close relationship to my ancestors. And partly why I knew I could birth without medication with my daughter is because I come from strong people and I come from strong women. And I feel their presence in my life daily, especially as a mother. I like to say to my husband, I can do anything because I come from poor coal miners and slaves. I'm strong. So
Yeah.
I love that heritage. I'm proud of it. I was hoping to have my son on Juneteenth. That would be a really cool birthday. We were pretty sure we were going to name him Langston for Langston Hughes, but there were a couple other names we liked. So we were waiting until we saw his face. That's kind of what we do. But everything was pretty normal on June 19th. I went to the grocery store with my mask on, of course, and sort of felt like, well, I'm going to be pregnant for a little while longer. This boy does not seem to want to come out. I'd had a couple of really difficult nights leading up to that day where I was just uncomfortable. It was hot. And I remember just feeling big. I'd wake up in the morning, still pregnant. My daughter, who's not quite 2, still needs me. I was ready to be done. But the night of the 19th, actually, we were upstairs. We've been working our way through shows just like everybody else has during this pandemic. And our favorite this summer was Unsolved Mysteries. So we put a couple episodes on and I'd been going to bed around, I want to say 10, but that night I felt like I wanted to stay up a little bit more. So I went into the bathroom and my husband asked me if I wanted to watch another episode. And I said, sure. Sat down to go to the bathroom, had a wave, kind of thought, got up, had a couple more, sat down in the bed, went back into the bathroom, had a few more, came out of the bathroom and I was shaking a little bit. And I said to Seth, I said, I think that we should call the midwives. They were adamant about me calling as soon as anything happened because they didn't want me to labor without them. So they just said, don't worry. Even if it's a false alarm, we'll just go home. No big deal. And at this point, the curfews had lifted for the cities. So they were free to drive out and care for us. So Seth called the midwives and our doula. We had an amazing doula, Anne, who is a Hypnobabies doula. She was our doula for Priscilla, but she didn't make our birth with Priscilla. Priscilla's birth was pretty quick. I arrived at the birth center already pushing. So that was another piece of encouragement for home birth. I didn't think things were really getting going until we ended up calling our photographer, a friend of mine, and then my mom. And I remember being on the phone with one of them and just not being able to finish my sentence. So we had a birth ball out and I was sitting on that, just going through the waves, trying to be comfortable. I was timing everything with an app on my phone. And I had these beautiful affirmation cards that were scripts from the Hypnobabies tracks. And I laid them out on our bed so I could look at them. And I was playing my Hypnobabies tracks. Easy First Stage is the one that I was playing at this time. Seth was downstairs hustling, filling the birth tub. Priscilla was already asleep. And the first person to come upstairs was our midwife, Allie. And I just remember hearing her footsteps on the stairs and feeling just a sense of relief. And she was great. She's extremely peaceful and introverted, very, very kind. And she just sat with me. And this is the thing that I love about the midwifery model of care is it's just watchful waiting. Nothing is being done to me. There's consent. I feel like it's just this very sacred, beautiful, almost holy practice. So she sat by me and a couple of times she listened to baby and she just reminded me to breathe. And then a few minutes later, our doula, Anne, came upstairs. And right around the time she arrived, I was back in the bathroom, throwing up and going to the bathroom at the same time, which is very hard to do. I remember thinking, okay, do I throw up in between my legs or do I get up and just like pee on the floor and throw up in the sink? I couldn't figure it out. And of course, I realized I have to be in transition, right? And I was fine mentally, but I just was frustrated because I couldn't figure out what to do with my body at that moment. And Anne was just talking me through it. She was so kind. She was speaking the Hypnobabies tracks over me. I was just like, okay, I'm in transition. I just have to get through it. And truly, birth for me is not super painful. That's not my experience. I would describe it as intense. And I remember before transition with Langston's birth, feeling like, oh no, not this again, kind of like this annoyance. But it was one, next step, and just like taking it one moment at a time and remembering to breathe and listening to my tracks. So after a while, one of the other midwives from Roots, her name is Lexi. She also was at our birth. She was fantastic. And she came upstairs, and she had done births in hospitals and birth centers, but she had never done a home birth. So I had invited her because I was like, do you want to come see my home birth? I think it'd be fun. And my mom is actually a nurse. So my mom has a doctorate in nursing practice, I should say. She'll definitely want me to include that. But Lexi had reminded me that the tub was ready and that we were going to head downstairs. So Seth took me by the hand, and it sounds very romantic, but we just had to get downstairs to the birth tub. I was through transition at this point and just kind of feeling like, okay. And I was in my nightgown and I was ready to change into, for birth, I wanted to wear just this really nice, comfortable bra. So I put that on, and I remember laughing and saying, like, I'm just naked standing here in a room full of people, but that's what birth is about. So I got into the tub and it felt glorious. And for a couple of minutes, I just relaxed. And I had been throwing up heavily upstairs. So I had asked that Lexi tell Seth to bring something down for me to throw up in. And he brought down a stock pot from our set of pots. So he brings this stock pot into the nursery, and I'm like, what is this for? And he's like, well, if you get sick, I'm like, how much vomit do you think I have in me? Like, I laugh because in our birth photos, there's a stock pot just sitting in Langston's crib. So we have these beautiful old leaded glass windows. You can see right through them, day or night. And Seth had opened up the curtain. So I'm also sitting in the birth tub. It's the middle of the night. The lights are on. And I'm thinking, what is someone going to think if they drive by and they see me in this tub with all these people in here? So it was pretty comical. Pretty much right away, I could tell that my body was getting ready to push, and I was anxious to get my son out and to meet him. So I remember kind of coming forward, leaning over the side of the tub, and Seth was just rubbing my arms and shoulders, and I was starting to push. And I made no noises when I had my daughter, and I just really breathed her down. And I think it was because I was so focused and determined to have a natural birth with her that I knew it was happening. I just felt like if I move, something will go wrong. But with Langston, I was more active in the labor. And I wonder if that was just because I knew what was happening. And I remember my doula, Anne, saying, you can take your time. You can take your time. And at one point I just, said, I want him out of me. And I was making a couple of loud noises. And then all of a sudden I knew he was going to be born. And Rebecca, who had also been very much on the, sidelines watching, that watchful waiting, she realized that Langston had a nuchal hand, which means he had a hand by his face. So she very quickly just came in and got his hand out. I don't remember that being painful. I don't remember it being anything but just an adjustment so that I could birth my son. And then his head was out, and Seth also caught Priscilla. So this is another special tradition that we have now, and pulled him up on my chest, and he was huge. I remember looking at him thinking, he looks like a linebacker. I can't wait to weigh him. And it was great. Priscilla was crying in her room next door. So Seth went to help her, and she was standing up in her crib, and she said, baby, baby. Yeah, it was so cute. She'd heard him cry, and Seth said, yeah, go back to sleep and you can meet him in the morning. I did ask what time it was. So we called our midwife at 11:15 p.m., I believe. And I had my son around 1 a.m.
Wow.
So it was a whirlwind. And for me, after I've had a baby, I just have a difficult time gauging time. So I had no idea what time it was. I thought it was maybe 3 or 4. And I was just so glad that everybody had made it. So I birthed my placenta, and we do placenta encapsulation. So that was something that I wanted to do a second time. And then it was time to get out of the tub and head upstairs. And I remember Lexi telling me, okay, we're going to do this in one trip. We're going to get out of the tub and we're going to walk upstairs. And so I have this Chuck's pad like hanging in between my legs. I'm wet, so I got dried off, and it's just, you have this sense of relief. I felt this huge sense of relief and excitement. We walked upstairs, and then I just didn't feel great. I felt really nauseous, a little bit lightheaded, and tired. I just had a baby, but I was fine and I was excited. My afterbirth pains with my son were more intense than they were with Priscilla, which I had been warned about from other moms, but of course, when you're in the moment. And so we were just on our bed and we were relaxing and taking it all in. Our entire team was up there. I have a little IKEA cart, those IKEA rolling carts that I had filled with postpartum supplies. And so they brought that up. We had the basket ready, and Langston had lots of skin to skin time. And then eventually I tried to get him to eat. He didn't want to eat right away. Then he ate for a while. And then it was time to weigh him. I was very excited. And so Allie was on the other side of the bed, and I had a 9.5-pound baby.
Wow.
Which I was impressed by. So I said, wait a minute, let's weigh him again. Thinking there's got to be a scale error, right? Nope. They put him back in those cute slings. I love those Homebirth weight slings, are just sweet. They weighed him again. Yep. 9 pounds, 8 ounces. I was impressed with myself, I have to say. I did end up needing a repair because of the nuchal hand, mostly because, in all honesty, I was impatient. I pushed him out very quickly. I wanted to see his face. But I have to say, they did a great job on my repair. I feel great. And Langston right away fell asleep. Our team cleaned up everything. Seth was so impressed. He's like, they took out the garbage. They did our laundry. They folded the laundry. And I was like, yes, this is why Homebirth is the best. And so our doula left, our photographer left, and the midwives left. And so by 4 a.m., we were all tucked in, fell asleep for a couple hours, and woke up around 6:30 because that's what my internal clock was making me do in the summer. And my mom was downstairs in our guest room. She got up with Priscilla and she brought her upstairs. And I'd been telling her, I said, one of these days you're going to wake up and you're going to come upstairs and your baby is going to be here. I have no idea how much of it she understood, but she came upstairs. We had bought a present on behalf of him for her. So we said that it was from him. She got to unwrap these magnetic blocks, and she was very excited about meeting him and very curious. I was still nursing her. I weaned her shortly after. And, she just was very curious of Langston. And yes, that's his birth story. Langston James. He is our chunk. We love him. I loved my home birth. It was fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Was there anything from like longer term postpartum that you want to share? We heard a little bit about the immediate.
As far as healing or...
Yeah, physical and emotional recovery.
Yeah. I think that for those of us who've had babies in 2020, we were sort of on our own. It felt like once my visits were virtual, starting in my second trimester, and I was just on my own, but I felt empowered to take good care of myself and to listen to my body. And again, had this sense of confidence in, I'm strong, I'm healthy, I can do this, and all is well. And I just kept that perspective. With postpartum, things had opened up a little bit more. So I did end up going back to the birth center for a 6-week postpartum visit, and Langston was doing well. I was doing well. I will say with a toddler, it's just so different, and nobody really, I think, can prepare you for having a second, because with your first, you're completely blindsided by this new role of parent. But with your second, you have now 2 children that you're caring for. So we had quite a bit of help. Our neighbor came and helped quite a bit. She was totally instrumental. She would take Priscilla in the morning for a little while. And I really love the Taking Care of Babies newborn course. I took that because the one thing postpartum I really struggled with Priscilla was sleep. That was the biggest struggle for me in parenting. With Langston, I wanted to have a different story. So I took the course, and, kids are different. Every child is different. So it might just be that he was larger, he was term, and I've heard, that wives' tale that bigger babies sleep better, but he started giving me 5 to 6 hour stretches at 5 weeks old. So I was lucky. And now he's 4 months old, and we made it through the regression. He's up between 4 and 6 sometimes, and then down again for another hour or so. We've had a great experience with sleep. So if moms are looking for resources, that's one I highly recommend. And I would say, postpartum, really and truly continuing to kind of guard our family space. I am not one who likes a lot of visitors or a lot of meals. That's not something that we need. I know that some people really love that. They love the visitors, they love the meals. For me, it's just stressful. It feels very stressful. So we didn't do a meal train, and that was okay. We had a couple of close friends bring us meals. That was very helpful. But my husband took a few weeks off of work, like he did when Priscilla was born, and he loves to cook. So he would cook, and we just made it work. I said no a lot. And I don't think our culture is great about that. The pandemic makes it a little easier.
Right.
But, I don't know if you know anything about the Enneagram. I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm the challenger, probably should have been an attorney. So I don't struggle with some more of those like harder boundary settings. But as a new mom, when friends have had babies, I've just really honored their space. I think we are just not great about giving new parents space. And for me, I knew that people wanted to meet Priscilla when she was born and to meet Langston when he was born. But postpartum was much easier this time because we were able to really just be a family, and we had visitors. We had my parents and then Seth's parents, and that was really great, but I said no a lot. I also took a maternity leave, which I did not do with Priscilla. I work very, very infrequently. I'm a photographer, like I said at the beginning in my bio. And I had Priscilla in August, and October is our busy season for photography here in Minnesota because of the colors. I mostly focus on young families, so people right in my season of life. I went back to work too soon with Priscilla. I was not ready to really take on the amount of sessions that I did. With Langston, I was really adamant about not working until October. And it still surprises me, the pushback I got from that. It's disappointing to me, especially coming from other women and other moms, that hearing, oh, I'm on maternity leave is not enough of an answer. I sometimes think people forget what it's like to be with a newborn. A lot of people love that newborn phase. I did not love the newborn phase with my daughter. I was completely overwhelmed. I liked the newborn phase with my son, but after that first sleep regression, I feel like we just have really gotten into a great groove, but I'm in no position to entertain people. I think for me, the standard that I have for having guests in my home, to me, that means I offer you something to drink, I get it for you. I offer you something to eat, I get it for you. That's not everybody's way of doing things, but for me, that's what I like to do. And I can't do that to the level that I want to as a brand new mom. For me, I just want to be at home, lay in bed for 2 weeks. That's another thing. I'd like to touch on that. I know our culture, especially our American culture, is really obsessed with this bounce back thing. I am definitely a go-getter. I'm a doer. I'm a self-starter. I really listened to my midwives when I had Scylla, and I look at our breastfeeding numbers in our country and our PPA and PPD numbers. And I just wonder, this is a very rhetorical question. What would it look like if we offered the leave and the lying in that women and their babies need? What would those rates look like after that? I just think that would be so interesting. So we did the same with Langston. I was in bed for 2 weeks. So I was upstairs and I was dying to go for a walk. I was dying to get outside. And I remember my midwife saying, I know that you like to be busy, but I'm going to tough love you right here. You need to stay in bed for 2 weeks. And it's your investment. She phrased it in a way that really resonated with me. She said, this is your investment so you can enjoy your summer. So I kept saying that to myself every time I wanted to be busy. This is my investment so that I can enjoy my summer. So I watched shows. I took pictures of my son. I rested. I took my placenta encapsulations. We focused on nursing. That was what we did. I drank a lot of water, and I'm not a napper, so I couldn't really nap, but I would rest, and there's something to be said for just resting. That was huge. And, I feel pretty lucky because I'm strong. I birth efficiently. I know that's not everybody's story, but I do credit the care that I receive. And, thankfully, Rebecca and Roots have gotten the attention that they deserve. But one thing that does frustrate me in birth culture, is birth culture a thing? Can we say birth culture?
I think so.
Does it fall under motherhood culture?
I think it's a little different. Because for some people, it's not even a part of their story. But yeah.
Yeah. One thing that's really frustrating for me, I know that drug-free natural birth, home birth is very trendy right now from a cultural standpoint. I understand that. And I know that people in difficult situations can feel judged or condemned. I've read a lot of things about, I don't want to hear the word natural birth because my birth was natural too, because I had a baby. There's a lot of stuff around semantics in birth culture. Hospitals now calling themselves birth centers, which I don't agree with. And it frustrates me because I saw someone create an incredible business, an incredible birth center in a predominantly Black neighborhood, in a predominantly impoverished neighborhood. And this is someone who's been rightfully featured in the press. And I've also seen people say, but, what about high-risk moms? Well, if people were willing to do their research, right? Basically, they're inferring that this birth center can turn away people that are quote unquote high risk, whatever that means to you, because that means different things to different people. What frustrates me about that statement is it discredits the work that this individual has done and that people within the birth community who have a focus towards racial justice have done. And it takes away from basically, I think, this person's success. And so I get frustrated with that. And I understand that there are people with a lot of different opinions. I know there are people that think home birth is incredibly risky and that I was crazy and I risked my life. I would ask them to look at evidence-based birth, but yes, I understand that that's their perspective. I know it's hard for moms who maybe wanted one story and ended up with something else, but I think we need to give people credit where credit is due, and we need to celebrate the fact that this is a Black-owned birth center that is doing incredible work. And by the way, they're the only birth center in Minnesota that doesn't have a BMI limit. So when people talk about high risk, that's sometimes a factor, but there's a lot of information about that. I'm sure you're well aware of, the different conversations around BMI with birth, but not only I think just a fantastic place to have a baby, having had a baby there, but they're doing great work. And so it's frustrating for me when that work gets discredited because there's an assumption that they're turning away people. Now, I don't think that any of the birth centers are doing anything unsafe because they're accredited by the state. And I trust that process. But I want those midwives and I want the people that are willing to decolonize birth to be celebrated without other people's junk getting in the way. We're in a weird place culturally. And I also think home birth has historically been in the modern era, right? Something that like white affluent women do. And okay, so I think it's really been fascinating, interesting to watch the midwives, at least here in the Twin Cities, offer different stories for people, because this has always been the thing that I've come back to. You can't choose what is not an option for you. So if you don't know that home birth is an option for you, you can't choose that for yourself. And so I think it's critical that, women see that there's other options. And I'm hopeful that our birth stats will continue to get better as time goes on. And I just really love the carrot roots. I mean, I love that when I go in there and they say, what is your birth control method? And I say natural family planning, I'm not laughed at, because for me, that's the decision that our family has made for right now. And I don't want to be ridiculed for that. Or, you're still nursing your 2-year-old. Okay, that's celebrated and, seen as fine instead of, okay, that's kind of strange. I've been so happy with my care. And I am such an advocate for the midwifery model of care as just, a great choice for women should they decide to make that decision.
Yeah, I think like you said, if you don't know about it, you can't choose it. And then also so many barriers to access as far as insurance and state by state, what's covered and what's not, and having to, pay for your birth completely out of pocket if you want a home birth.
Right. And
those things can make it really difficult as well.
And we are privileged enough to be able to do that. Now, my birth cost, I think $3,000, maybe $3,500. I'd have to look back on the numbers. That did not include doula care, and that did not include my birth course. But let's look at an out-of-pocket cost for a cesarean at a hospital. Let's look at the out-of-pocket cost for, a low-intervention vaginal birth. I know women who paid $5,000 out of pocket for, a vaginal birth at a hospital. So to me, if you kind of look those over, I was happier to choose the home birth method. And that was what worked for us. Like I said, we were able to afford to pay for it, but the birth centers in Minnesota are covered by insurance. So that is one very positive thing that I'm very grateful for. So if you can't afford a home birth, a birth center is a great option. And of course, I'm a proponent of RUTs. I think they are the most home birth-like place to have a baby that's not at home. So if you want a home birth, can't make it happen and you're in Minnesota, I recommend RUTs. I say this all the time in the different groups that I'm in on Facebook. I really am very happy with my births, both of them. And I know that that is because of the care that I received. Not that I'm against hospitals if you need them. I think thank God for them. And thank God for cesareans if you need them. But I knew I wanted something where I felt like I had a voice and that things weren't being done to me. I've just heard so many, especially from other Black women, really bad stories of, everything that you can imagine, from being told that their husbands couldn't come pray with them before they went into a cesarean. And then, nurses behind their backs, making fun of them and calling them ghetto when there's a visitor who's going to see them in the hall waiting to come in and they're listening to this. I wouldn't want somebody caring for me like that. And it's atrocious. So for me, I feel like until the healthcare system gets itself together, I'm going to not participate. There's a really great book called The Warmth of Other Suns. The author also wrote Caste, Isabel Wilkerson. She writes about race in America. And in Warmth of Other Suns, she focuses on the Great North Migration. And she talks a lot about the numbers, these mass numbers of people after Reconstruction and whatnot coming up north to take these factory jobs. And she has this very profound quote where she basically says, there's an immense power in simply leaving a system or a place that doesn't work for you. And so for me, if something isn't working for me, I am less interested in trying to change it from the inside and more interested in finding something else that does. And I think that there's power in that for women in birth if they can make those decisions. And I hope that for every person who's birthing, that they have options, because I think it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, I loved my births and I'm so, so grateful every single day. There's not a day that passes where I don't think about Priscilla or Langston's birth with joy. I'm just very blessed and lucky.
That's amazing to hear.
It is. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing this story. And I feel like you've mentioned a lot of great resources, but if there's anything else you want to add here, let me know.
Sure. So Hypnobabies, babies courses, both in person if they're still being offered, and then the home study are fantastic. They have a very active, wonderful members only Facebook group. The placenta encapsulation and tincturing. I did encapsulation and tincturing with Priscilla. I did just encapsulation with Langston, but I have some of my tincture left over from Priscilla, which has been great. I love ordering my supplies through preciousarrows.com. They had really great pricing. You can do a la carte or you can do kits. So if you're home birthing and you're looking for a place to buy your supplies, my friend Morgan of C and Ivy Design on Etsy made my affirmation card. She does custom work. She was fantastic. I'm a big fan of the Spectra S1 pump, the Haka, game changer, worth it.
All right. And then where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Instagram. My handle is Katherine Louise DeGroot.
Thank you so much again for sharing. It was so great.
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Now I'm going to chat with Lauren about Kindred Bravely, today's sponsor. Hi, Lauren. Thanks for coming on the podcast today to chat with me about Kindred Bravely.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Can you tell listeners a little bit about you before we start talking about Kindred Bravely?
Sure. I am married to my wife, Deanna. We've been married for about 3 years, and we have a 20-month-old daughter, Sawyer, whose birth story we recorded here. And then I'm due any day now with our second, his baby boy.
So, did you discover Kindred Bravely with your daughter, or is it newer to you?
Yeah, I think I actually first heard about Kindred Bravely from listening to your podcast. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I found underwear really uncomfortable. I don't know if that's super common or not, but I had a really hard time trying to find underwear that felt good. And so I started with their under the belly hipster underwear. And at the time they were using that really, really soft, like bamboo-like material. And so that was the first thing that I purchased from them. And I swear it was like slipping into heaven. It was wonderful.
Yeah, those underwear are insanely comfortable. And I feel like I was missing out with my first 2 pregnancies, just like making normal underwear work, because you should totally treat yourself. You know, it's like, I think $20 for a 3-pack or something for butter underwear, like you said.
Right. It was well worth it. And I remember after I was pregnant, I decided that I wasn't going to wear them when I was not pregnant, so that when I was pregnant again, I would have them there ready.
So smart. So you don't wear them out.
Yeah, exactly. And so I started with those. I think they changed the material for the hipster underwear, so I bought another around this pregnancy, and the sizing didn't fit the same. And just kind of a side note, because they, one of the things that I've seen them in their ads talk about is their customer service, and they were great. I messaged them and I was like, I thought I was buying the same thing, and I got them and they didn't fit right, and they just sent me a new size free of charge, which was way more than I expected. So that was great.
Yeah, they're so great about making it right, for sure. What else have you tried? Just the underwear, or have you tried any of the bras or tanks?
No, I actually, this time being pregnant, I sort of like made up how to wear pajamas in my first pregnancy, which looking back seems kind of silly. I think I was that way about a lot of the maternity clothes. I thought, oh no, it'll be fine. I'll just wear bigger size t-shirts or something. But maternity stuff really does feel better. So I got 2 pair of their shorts pajamas this time. And again, that material is just like butter. Putting it on is just fantastic. And it was nice to have something kind of new that was special for being pregnant. So it was fun.
Yeah, I definitely recommend for the moms out there who are going into the fall, winter baby time frame, the long, kind of like, they're almost like legging pajamas with a nursing top that's long sleeves, and you could wear them as like long johns or pajamas. And I like lived in those.
Yeah, I think they're like almost the same style. It's just the ones that I bought were during the springtime. So they were shorts and short sleeve shirt. Yeah. And then I bought their nightgown too, that I'm saving for after delivery in the hospital. But it's the same material. It's that same cozy, just remember last time after having my daughter in the hospital, I was still wearing the hospital gown. And it was when visitors started coming, it was like impossible to keep the whole thing up while I was nursing. And so I decided this time I wanted to have something that was specifically made for me to nurse on one side and not be exposing myself to everybody that walked in the room. It made the fathers and brothers uncomfortable.
I know, like, I will nurse in public and, like, I have no problems, but there's something about, like, my dad and brother that I'm like, I think I'm going to just cover up.
I know.
Okay, I just looked it up. It's the Jane Maternity and Nursing Thermal Pajamas. Those things are, like, the softest pajamas ever. They're long sleeves and long pants, so you probably wouldn't want to wear them in the summer. But I also just talked to someone recently who wore the Kindred Bravely labor and delivery gown for, like, after the baby was born, for kind of like that hospital stay when they still needed to check her fundus or her scar and for nursing and stuff. So that's something to keep in mind too. You probably wouldn't want to wear it if you wore it during labor, but if you didn't.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't seen that one. I looked at it might have been I clicked on an ad specifically for the nightgown, the nursing and pregnancy nightgown, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I'm glad that all those things were working out for you.
Yeah, they're great. I also have a couple of their bras, the Terry Racerback.
Mm-hmm.
I bought that in 2 sizes. And I think that's really comfortable too, because it's not a really super structured bra, so sleeping in it feels comfortable.
Yeah, that's what I use it for.
Oh, okay, perfect. I was going to say, not particularly large chested, but it feels like I grow so much when I'm pregnant. Crazy. I'm not used to having it. Yeah. So that seems to be working well too.
Awesome. Yeah, those are really cozy. And I know some moms can wear them like all day long, but I pretty much just wear them for sleep. And then I need the Simply Sublime ones for during the day.
Yeah, I can wear mine during the day. At least for now. We'll see when I'm nursing. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me about Kindred Bravely.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to.
Thank you so much again to Katherine for sharing her birth story with us, and to Kindred Bravely for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget you can use the coupon code BIRTHHOUR for 20% off your purchase at kindredbravely.com. If you want more information from today's episode, head over to thebirthhour.com and search for Katherine's name in the search bar, and her show notes page will come up for you. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.